Okay, so welcome to a short video about installing an Android head unit in a Toyota GT86. So this is the Toyota GT86. It's got the standard factory supplied head unit, and this particular vehicle doesn't have any steering wheel controls. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove the standard Toyota head unit and we're going to replace it with this head unit, which is an Scion UA13 Plus. So this is an Android head unit. It's got a 10.1 inch screen. The processor in it is a 4-core Rockchip 3562, and it has relatively little memory. It's got 2 gigabytes of RAM, 32 gigabytes of ROM. So it's not a particularly expensive or powerful unit. I think they cost somewhere in the region of about £120. However, having tested these out, used them before, we know that it connects very well wirelessly and wired to Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. So it's fine for using Android Auto on. The sound quality is quite reasonable. It's got a IPS screen, about I think it's 1280 by 760, so the resolution's quite adequate for running Google Maps on Android Auto. So all round, not a bad unit. Now the unit has got this double DIN chassis to it, so we need to take out the Sony unit, which is actually wider than double DIN. So the Sony unit is 200 millimeters wide by about 100 high, whereas double DIN is 180 wide by 100 high. So the double DIN unit is actually 20 millimeters narrower than the Sony unit. So we're going to use some Toyota supplied brackets, which are for mounting aftermarket double DIN head units into the Toyota dash. So you would need to order these brackets, and I'll show you those in a moment. And in addition to that, we'll also show you the wiring loom that's required to go from this Android head unit to the Toyota wiring harness. It's a very simple install because this car has very few options on it. There's no steering wheel controls, there's no reversing camera, so it's pretty much a straightforward swap with a wiring adapter. The screen itself adjusts up and down by about 40 millimeters. It will also angle, and it will fit nicely between this center vent and the heater controls and so on the center console. So it'll fit in there quite nicely and can be angled toward the driver. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to remove the factory fitted head unit. So really all we need is a trim tool to pry off the front panel. So that's just held in by some of these little plastic clips. And then the head unit itself is just held in by 4 10mm bolts. And then the head unit will just pull forward and we can disconnect the wiring harnesses at the back. Okay, so this is the standard Toyota head unit we've just taken out. So as I said, in the car, the standard head unit is 200 millimeters wide. The chassis is actually the same width as double DIN. It's 180. The replacement head unit is also 180 wide. Now we could remove the standard factory brackets and adapt them to the new head unit, but that involves enlarging holes, and a better solution is actually to buy a pair of brackets that Toyota specifically sell for mounting aftermarket head units. So I will put the part number of these brackets into the video. So you can get these from a Toyota dealer. I actually ordered them from a Toyota part supplier in Japan. They took a week or so to come, and I think they're around £5 or £6 each, so they're not particularly expensive, and it just makes the installation a little bit easier. They've also got holes drilled in the right places to fit standard double din mounting. Now you need to position the bracket so that this upper bit here, this upper mount, is 37mm from the front face. So this is the front face of the head unit, sits flush with the dash, and this part of the bracket here needs to be 37mm back from it, and then when you put it into the dash it'll mount flush. Now in our particular case, because we're fitting a 10.1 inch screen, you won't see the small gap. Because the standard head unit is 200mm, if you fit a double din, there's around a 10mm gap each side. So if we were fitting a standard double din with a 7-inch screen, we could buy two plastic cheeks to fit either side to fill in the gap in the dash trim between the head unit and the dash trim. It's about 10mm each side. But because we've got this bigger screen, that gap is actually hidden by this 10.1 inch screen, and it won't be seen. So putting the standard Toyota unit aside, what we need to install our new unit is, first of all, we're going to need an adapter lead. So you can buy these off AliExpress. The GT86 uses standard Toyota connectors that they've been using for many years. So at one end we've got the 16-pin ISO connector, which is common to most of these Android head units. So that plugs into that 16-pin plug goes into the Android head unit. And at the other end of the harness we've got the standard Toyota connectors. So we've got the 10-pin lead, which handles the power and the front speaker, front left, front right speaker. And it also has a wire here for illumination, so that when you switch the lights on the car, that provides a signal to the head unit to dim the screen. The other connector we have is a 6-pin connector, and that is for the rear speakers in the car. We then have this connector here, which has got 2 pins, and this is the antenna connector. So this takes us from the standard Toyota antenna, which is a coaxial, and this blue wire here is the feed to the antenna amplifier, the 12-volt feed to the antenna amplifier, and that connects us to a coaxial antenna plug for the head unit. We also have a 28-pin connector, which is used for ancillary functions. Now we're not going to use that on this car because this car doesn't have steering wheel controls or any other options for that matter. Okay. We do have the option to feed in a reversing camera, and on the harness there's this brown wire which is labelled back, and what we would do is connect that to a signal from the reversing lights, and that would cause the head unit to switch over to the reversing camera video input. The head unit manufacturer will supply you with various pigtails. So this one here, for example, has the input for the external microphone, and it also has a video input connector for a reversing camera if you're using a reversing camera. And then of course we've got other connections such as the GPS and so on. One further thing we need is what we call a USB retention lead. So the GT86 has a USB socket in the dashboard, and what we would need to get along with this is a lead to connect that USB terminal in the wiring harness to the USB output of this unit, and I'll show you that when we go to put this in the car. So they are all the connections that we need. Now we're going to use an external microphone with this because the internal microphone quality is terrible. I've already inside the screen unit here, I've already disconnected the internal microphone. I've cut the track, and you can look at how to do that on a separate video. Now the Headunit supplier, they give you this little microphone. The quality is very poor. It's not really suitable for making phone calls while the car's in motion. The background noise is pretty horrendous. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this microphone. This is an Olympus ME52. So this is a noise cancelling directional microphone. I'm going to mount this on the steering cowl and plug this in to the external microphone, connect to on the pigtail that goes into the radio. So it's relatively straightforward then. We just connect up our wiring harnesses. We've got our 4 10mm bolts to hold this into the dash. We put the trim back on and check it works basically, and mount the microphone on the steering column cowl. Okay, so back in the car, I've connected up the adapter harness. So that's connected to the Toyota front and rear speakers. We've got the antenna connector, the GPS antenna that came with the units stuck up there. So it's just really a question of plugging everything in. So we'll connect up the GPS. Okay, so the GPS antenna's connected there. We can connect up the coaxial antenna lead. We've got a harness here which, to make sure those snap home, which carries the external microphone connector. I've already fed the external microphone lead through to the top of the steering column cowl, so we'll plug that in there. And we've got another connector here which is for the reversing camera, and it also has the antennas for the Bluetooth and the Wi-Fi, so we need to plug that in even if we're not using the reverse camera. We've got the main harness which needs to plug in across here. 16-pin connector, and then finally we have the USB retention lead which goes down to the USB connector on the dashboard. So we'll plug that in. Okay, so that's everything connected up. And we can feed the leads back behind the dash. And then we need to put the 10mm bolts in. So for that we'll just slide off the screen. Put the 10mm bolts in place. Okay, so I've secured the full 10mm bolts. The screen's free of the unit. I need to put a trim piece over and just snap that into place. Okay, and now we can slide the screen back down onto the head unit. Now there are these gaps at the side which you would need to fill if you were using a conventional doubled in head unit with a 7-inch screen, but because we're using this particular unit with its 10.1-inch screen, those gaps we're going to leave, because basically you won't see them when the screen's in place. So let's drop the screen down into place. Okay, and we can position it so that it just is angled towards the driver slightly, maybe down a little bit more. And we've still got access to the heater controls and the vents still free. And for the moment, we've just mounted the microphone on top of the steering wheel cowl. We've got a little windscreen to put on it, a foam muff to pop on there, but we'll mount that better, figure out a better mount for that in due course. Okay, so we've connected the screen back up, powered the ignition on. Just watch the unit boot up. Okay, so there we are, and it seems to be working. Okay, so it's all working. Okay, so job done.